Welcome everybody to our March Land Use Lunch Hour. My name is Sophia Heydrich. I am the Advocacy Director for Mountain Area Preservation. And I'll let our Executive Director introduce herself.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexis Aller. I'm the Executive Director of Mountain Area Preservation. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
So this is going to be the first Land Use Lunch Hour in a series where we talk all about our recent legal challenge against the TRPA, or Tahoe Regional Planning Agency's Phase 2 housing amendments. This stuff can get a little bit detailed and in the weeds, so we wanted to spend a few of these sessions really diving into our specific legal arguments. We will start off with sort of a high-level overview of what was actually approved, but then dive deep into some of the issues. So I hope that this is an opportunity to learn more about what our lawsuit is all about and ask questions and get to know, hopefully get some support on what we're up to in the Tahoe Basin. So first off, just a quick agenda. We just did our brief introduction, and I will go over a couple of rules for the Zoom, and then we will dive into the meat of the issue. Alexis will give a brief overview of what actually was approved in the TRPA, or Tahoe Regional Planning Agency's Phase 2 housing amendments. Then we'll go through the public process timeline. We will identify the changes that were made sort of in the 11th hour at the very final hearing. Then we'll provide some regional context of what housing needs are really required in the region. Then we will talk about the legal challenge, our first issue, which is really directly related to affordable housing. That's going to be what we dive deep into today. And then finally, we'll wrap up with some true workforce housing solutions that we support and some other ideas moving forward that we think could really actually start to address the critical housing crisis that we're facing in the region. And then finally, we'll wrap up with some questions and answers. So a couple of meeting rules. First off, this meeting is being recorded, and then we will hold the Q&A at the end of the meeting. Please raise your hand and wait to be called on. Be respectful of other participants' opinions and perspectives. This is an open meeting, so you can unmute yourself and ask your questions, but with a little bit of autonomy, we hope that you will respect the rules that we set forth. And then finally, this Zoom will be recorded and posted on our legal challenge webpage at www.mountainareapreservation.org/TRPA. I'll pass it to Alexis.
So you might be asking, what are the Phase 2 housing amendments, the Phase 2 TRPA housing amendments? And the Phase 2 amendments were really born out of a multi-year process. And Sophia will share later about when MAP learned about the amendments. But really, these code and regulations for housing are focused as incentives for deed-restricted, affordable, or moderate and achievable housing. And we'll discuss what achievable housing is here in a bit, because that's a different definition and also a new housing term. But the focus was to allow these deed-restricted units in town centers and to incentivize unlimited density, unlimited coverage, and an increased height from 56 feet to 65 feet, along with a no minimum parking requirement. So if a developer could offset or basically make the justification that the parking management plan in Placer County or Washoe County or El Dorado County was enough to not provide housing for their project in a town center, they could, in theory, have a project with no parking. The other piece was the multifamily zone. So these are parcels outside of our town centers that have been outlined. And this would also allow for unlimited density and a parking reduction. So it would be 0.75 spaces per unit, which is a reduction from the previous the parking requirement. So this covers, this slide is focused on the height, and many of you know the Domus project in Kings Beach. It's the affordable workforce housing project on the State Route 28 corridor, as well as projects within the grid. There's a couple of other projects within the grid that are workforce housing. And this is just an example of existing development with 48 feet as the height and what 65 feet could bring, which is a significant change to the built environment that we see, specifically in North Lake Tahoe, where we don't have tall buildings. So this is a drastic, extreme land use change and something that is a part of our legal challenge as well. The piece that I think has really been really hard for a lot of us to understand and grapple with is this concept of unlimited density, that town centers could have unlimited density and what that means, how many units per acre. And so part of what we have been helping the community understand is how drastically different that is that with what exists in the Tahoe Basin when you look at how the built environment is utilizing those parcels and really how many units per acre. So unlimited density is a real urban planning, I would say, initiative, and it's also only in 7 metropolitan cities. And for us, we don't consider Tahoe a metropolitan city. It is a mountain environment, and we need to have scalable development for our mountain environment. The other change was coverage. And so typically for your coverage, that's like your lot, how you consume that parcel with your development footprint. And previously the coverage allowance was 70%. Now with the amendments, it's 100%. So in theory, you could consume your entire parcel with your built product. So that means no setbacks, no buffers, and really, what does that do to the mass and scale of the built environment in a location such as Tahoe? So coverage is also a part of this piece. And now I'm going to pass it over to Sophia, who's going to talk a little bit about the process that has unfolded and how we got to where we are today.
So this is the TRPA housing amendments timeline, and the TRPA will tell you that these amendments, this set of amendments, was underway for a couple of years. They've been working sort of behind the scenes with a working group to develop these amendments. But in terms of the public process, the public facing process, this has been a very fast timeline. Anyone who follows land use knows that these housing amendments, any sort of code amendment or update, just takes time to get through the public process and really have meaningful opportunities for the public to engage and weigh in on what the amendments or what the proposals look like. So from our perspective, we first learned about the TRPA housing amendments over the summer, actually after the first Incline Village and Crystal Bay Citizen Advisory Board meeting, which was the first meeting sort of in North Lake Tahoe about the amendments. Then in September, there was a housing webinar, and from there, it was a very, very fast-tracked timeline. In the scope of a couple of months, in 3 months, September to December, there were 4 official TRPA hearings with final approval on December 13th. This was, I mean, in terms of land use, this was just a really fast-track timeline, not a whole lot of opportunity for folks to really understand and grapple with the amendments and then weigh in on the process. And then you also had final hearings right in the middle of the holidays, which again just provides one more sort of obstacle for folks to really get engaged when you're dealing with out-of-town travel and just time off of work and things along those lines. But the final approval was on December 13th, and a number of changes were made at that very final hearing, and we'll talk about those now. So what changed at the 11th hour? As Alexis mentioned, these are incentives for deed-restricted, affordable, moderate, and achievable housing. And right now, the ultimate outcome is for increased density, unlimited coverage, increased height, and no minimum parking requirement in town centers, and then also unlimited density and a parking reduction in multifamily zones. The original proposal also included an increase in coverage from 30% to 70% in multifamily zones if stormwater best management practices were in place, which is a big concern because we're relying on community members to really implement and maintain stormwater best management practices without sort of the required level of oversight to make sure that those impacts are being mitigated and we're not having runoff into Lake Tahoe that decreases water quality and clarity. And then the original proposal also included transition zones, which would have provided the same incentives as multifamily zones and an additional 11 feet in height in sort of these areas just outside of town centers. So it really was sort of a kind of a sprawling town center idea that allowed for additional incentives in those zones. And that was taken off the table for now. We've heard that it may come back in an additional phase that's coming down the line, but that was a win for the moment in terms of getting a good outcome at this meeting. Additionally, the TRPA made a stronger commitment to auditing deed restrictions. This is a critical component because, without auditing and really overseeing deed restrictions, we're just relying on the goodwill of folks, and not that people don't want to do the right thing, but we have found here in Truckee that when these kinds of projects were audited, about a third of the housing units were not actually going to the folks that they were intended to go to. And so that's a huge piece. If you're granting additional height and additional coverage and reduced parking requirements and, giving all these incentives to really specific housing, and then it doesn't even go to the folks who need that housing, that's a big issue. And it's really one of the problems that we flagged early on. And so MAP was advocating for 100% deed restriction auditing per year. We didn't quite get that far, but we did get up to 50%, which is better than where we started. So that was one of the changes. And then finally, they changed the number of affordable, moderate, and achievable housing units that are allocated under this program. And we're going to dive into that today. That's really kind of the heart of the issue today. And now I'll pass it back to Alexis to talk about this.
So as Sophia mentioned, on December 13th, sort of in a mad dash at the end of the hearing, the governing board was making a number of changes. And I think that while many of us have advocated that the need is for the affordable units, the focus, there has been more of a focus on achievable, and that's that market rate product. That we've heard from developers that's what makes sense. That's what they can bring forward in the Tahoe environment. But the problem is that in making the changes of how much goes to affordable, how much goes to moderate, how much goes to achievable, that they really undercut the affordable housing requirement. And so now with the new code, it's 75% affordable or moderate. And so and 25% achievable. And the key word in this change is affordable or moderate. There's no requirement of a certain specific type of affordable and a certain specific type of moderate. And so that undercuts the requirement, really the T in TRPA code, to bring forward affordable housing. And this is a huge concern for MAP. It gives the ability for a developer to really bring forward moderate and achievable, and there would be no requirement for affordable housing. Yes, there could be some good developers that say, hey, I've got tax credits, I've got subsidies, I'm doing affordable housing. But with these drastic changes at the 11th hour for TRPA, they removed their requirement for affordable housing. And that is one of our legal arguments and one of the biggest legal issues. And we did bring this issue to TRPA before filing our lawsuit. And in fact, they said, no, we're okay with what we did. They're okay with not focusing, basically not requiring the amount of affordable units. And so this is a big issue, and it'll be something that we continue to highlight and flag in our legal challenge. And if anyone has any specific questions on this change, we're happy to spend a little bit more time on it. The other piece here within the affordable housing issue is the definitions, right? What are we focused on? And so we know that the greatest amount of need within Tahoe and really the region is the affordable component. It's the affordable units, and that's the 80% area median income and below. And so you can see what that looks like for an income in Placer County or Douglas County. And every jurisdiction within the basin, the 5 counties, are all different. They all have different economic thresholds. But the affordable is the category of the largest need. Then you have moderate, and that moderate is that income between 80% and 120% AMI. So you are helping to support housing for some of that missing middle, within the moderate. But really that higher wage income earner is in that achievable category. And the problem here is that while we have said you have to work in the basin in the Tahoe Truckee Unified School District, you have to have a job within the school district at least 30 hours per week. The issue though is that there's no income requirement. So there's a gap, there's a loophole there within this housing definition that we've flagged in our advocacy throughout this process. And like I just said, I just mentioned that it was a loophole. We believe it's a loophole, and there's a way to remedy this. To not have an income cap on achievable housing is a disservice to incentivize and subsidize housing. And so we need an income cap on this type of housing. And that we believe that would help to really fix one of those issues that we've had. The other piece within our affordable housing challenge is subsidies. And if you know about subsidies, whether it be tax credits or federal grants for housing, subsidies have strings attached. And part of the driving force behind these incentives from the very beginning was TRPA hiring a consultant, Cascadia, and the consultant was really tasked to create market incentives, market solutions. So the driving force behind these land use changes, these codes and regulations was how do we make it easier for developers to bring forward the type of product that we need, the type of workforce housing product that we need. And so within that, it was like more height, more coverage, unlimited density. But even within these incentives, we have heard time and time again that they don't go far enough. And so these projects that come forward will still need subsidies. And those subsidies have issues. We've seen it here in Truckee that when you have subsidies and tax credit projects, you actually can't favor your local workforce. It's all income related. And so it won't be about whether or not you are qualified because you work in the community. It's about your income level. And so we will be helping to really illustrate this in our legal challenge and in our outreach and our education. But you know, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have projects that have tax credits and subsidies. It's just that those types of projects are very limiting. And we've learned that from the Truckee Artist Lofts, Coldstream Commons, Freshman 1, Freshman 2. So it's not as if we're coming at this without experience. We actually have a real vested experience working with developers and understanding how projects work with subsidies and also understanding how they don't work for the workforce. So that is also one piece of our legal challenge. I'm going to pass it over back to Sophia to give a little bit more of the regional context of the housing need.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of paint the picture right now of what kinds of housing units and housing types are actually needed in the area. And so this is a graph that came directly from the 2023 Housing Needs Assessment Update from Mountain Housing Council. Thanks to them, I stole this from them, but it's a good graph. So you can see on the left-hand side, we've got that affordable housing need shown in orange, and you see the need kind of up top and what is currently built down below in sort of the darker orange. So you can see here that that is a really big need. It's about 50% in Eastern Placer and Truckee. 50% of the housing need is for the affordable housing type. Then in the middle, that middle column between 80 and 120% of AMI, that's the moderate housing need, and that's about 25% of the need. And then above that, 120 to 245% is also about 25% of the need. So again, that's sort of the achievable or the missing middle housing type. But you can see really that the biggest need is for that affordable housing by far. How, you know, half is for affordable housing. And then here I just pulled out the numbers from Eastern Placer County, specifically took out the town of Truckee. So this kind of gives a better picture of, you know, more of the Kings Beach, Tahoe City area, those needs. And if you look at just Eastern Placer County, the need is even greater for affordable housing. 55% of the need is for affordable. then 27% is for moderate, and 18% is for that missing middle, more achievable housing piece. So again, just want to paint the picture that really, at least in North Lake Tahoe, the biggest need, kind of I guess the California side of North Lake Tahoe to be specific, the biggest need is for affordable housing. And I did want to also highlight something from Washoe Tahoe, just to look at a different jurisdiction. And the needs in Washoe County are definitely different than the needs in Placer County. On this graph, you will notice that the biggest need, about 62%, is actually above the 120% AMI. There's a smaller need for affordable, that's 24% of the need is for affordable housing units. And then about 15% of the need is for the moderate housing units, kind of that there in the middle. But what I want to draw your attention to is over on the right-hand side of the sort of arc, the light green color will show, it says right there that that's provided by the current market. So those higher end housing product types are actually the housing product types that it currently makes sense for developers to build. So when we see new projects in Tahoe, we're often seeing market rate luxury condos, second homes, that's sort of the need that is already being fulfilled, because that is the need that makes developers, or that's the housing product that makes developers the most money. So that's what the market is driving. So we believe that policies right now should be focused on driving forward the construction of the housing types that don't make sense in our market conditions, and that is affordable and moderate. And so just to kind of go back to the code language and the change that happened and why this is so important, we just talked about how the market is driving forward market rate housing, which is the higher end condos. It's not driving forward affordable or moderate products. And so we need codes and policies that incentivize those units, the construction of those units specifically. And at the 11th hour, the TRPA changed their language and made the requirement for affordable housing. They basically took that off the table. There is no requirement now for affordable housing. There's a requirement for affordable or moderate. So again, like Alexa said, a developer could choose to build affordable housing if for some reason that makes sense, but it's basically always going to make more sense to build moderate, because that is going to bring the developer more money. So if you give someone the option, we think there's going to be more affordable or more moderate housing built, and potentially no affordable housing built under the code amendments. Again, it's just a huge issue. You're giving more height, more density, more coverage, less parking. You're giving all of these carrots, and the need is for affordable, and you took away the requirement for affordable. So that's just one of our key legal issues. It's something that we're really driving home, and a big issue in terms of, social justice, the justice of these policies. And just to sort of recap, one final time, the board essentially took a proposal designed to provide over 500 units of desperately needed, truly affordable housing. We saw what the need is, especially in Placer County. That is a huge need. And they turned the policy into one that could actually provide not a single unit of affordable housing. Again, there could be affordable housing, but it's affordable or moderate. And we believe that developers will choose moderate and the most economically beneficial housing type every time. And so with that, we want to talk about the good news. What does MAP support? I'm going to pass it back to Alexis, and she's going to talk about what we're for.
So through the Mad Dash process, you might remember we did some petitions, we did some letters to the TRPA governing board, because part of our advocacy is bringing forward solutions. We're not just a no group. We actually are ardent workforce housing supporters, and we've actually been I would say one of the reasons why there's more than 700 workforce housing units in Truckee is not only through our advocacy, but through our relationship with developers, settlement agreements, negotiations. So we have a track record of actually bringing these types of product units to the region. And we believe that there are solutions out there that can support true, meaningful workforce housing without jeopardizing the quality of our environment and public safety. So the first one is let's unlock the existing housing units. I mean, over 60% of the units in Tahoe are empty. neighborhoods, streets, no one in existing housing stock. And so not only can we unlock this through short-term rental caps or bans, there's other types of opportunities and programs that are showing success in communities just like Tahoe, success in Truckee, success in mountain communities, where you can utilize that existing housing stock and get qualified workforce individuals and families in units as of today. So that is one opportunity through bans and short-term rentals. There's also the number two is an opportunity to create housing preservation programs. The town of Truckee is creating housing preservation programs. Placer County is creating housing preservation programs, and they are working. And so this is another opportunity to utilize what we already have. If we are in a crisis, building new, tall, dense units in Tahoe is not the fastest solution. The fastest solution is utilizing what we have. And so these preservation programs are unlocking units. The other piece is a home buyer assistance program. Another hat that MAP wears is part of the Martis Fund, and we created a down payment assistance program in 2015, and the program has been wildly successful. We've given the workforce a leg up to get into existing housing stock and make that dream happen. And maybe it's a starter home. Maybe it's not exactly what you want to see yourself in for your whole life, but we're able to be innovative and get people the resources in order to get in existing units. And I believe that the TRPA would be a wonderful entity to create a workforce housing preservation program for the whole basin. And that could be the whole basin preservation, home buyer assistance. So there's a number of creative ways that we believe the TRPA could be more influential than utilizing market incentives. And then, of course, we believe one of the easiest ways to close the loophole on the achievable housing is to create an income cap. And the income cap could be adjusted on a yearly basis as the economy fluctuates and things change. And every jurisdiction is different. Placer County's income cap on achievable housing will be different than Washoe County, will be different than El Dorado County. But to leave that wide open and not address the income is a social justice issue that we are confronting in this lawsuit. And the other piece is number 5. Why can't we go in and do site-specific opportunity sites and really identify the sites that make sense for density, for height, for 100% lot coverage? This is what you typically would do in this type of land use analysis. You would, just like what Placer County is doing in their Placer County Housing Rezone program, they are going and they are drilling down into the parcels and they're understanding, does this parcel make sense for this height, this density? What are the constraints? And the fact that we didn't do this in this process, I believe, is a disservice, but it also doesn't bring the community in to be a part of creating solutions for the workforce housing crisis. So we believe in solutions, and these are just some of them that we have brought forward in the public process. But part of why we like to do our education and outreach is to give other people the information and the tools and the resources to know that there are other ways to address this crisis. So with that, we're going to close our land use lunch hour number 3. But we always have a call to action. And the call to action today is, if you haven't taken the time to endorse our lawsuit, that's the first step. Say you support us, share it with your neighbors, share it with your friends, share it with your coworkers, because the more people that we have backing us in this land use legal challenge, the more successful we will be, because it is about applying that political pressure to not only the TRPA, but getting enough people in the community to be aware that there's a better way to bring forward the type of housing that we need and also address the housing crisis. So sign the petition, use your voice, and like Sophia said, we will be posting this presentation on our TRPA legal challenge page on our website. but we will also be continuing this effort with a series of additional land use lunch hours focused on our legal challenge, because you can't talk about a big lawsuit once. So thank you so much for being here with us today. And now we're going to move into Q&A, and we're going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.